Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with almond biscotti. That's right, as you may have heard, winter is coming. And while we don't have to worry about White Walkers, we do have to deal with something just as scary and even more ravenous. And that would be our friends and relatives showing up at our holiday gatherings. So with entertaining season right around the corner, this would be a perfect cookie recipe to master. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. And first up, we'll put together our dry ingredients, which will be some white all-purpose flour. And to that, we'll add some baking powder, not to be confused with baking soda. We want baking powder here. And then we'll also, of course, need a little touch of salt. And that is going to be it. And then we'll go ahead and grab our whisk and give this a mix for about a minute or so to make sure everything's nicely combined. And then once that's been accomplished, we can go ahead and set that aside and move on to the wet ingredients. And that's going to begin with some unsalted butter that ideally is at room temp. And to that, we'll add a little touch of white sugar, as well as my one and only secret ingredient, some olive oil. And then what we'll want to do is grab a spoon or a spatula and cream that sugar into the butter and oil. And as usual, my butter wasn't quite room temp. It was a little cooler than that, and therefore stiffer. So this did take me an extra minute or two to get started. But once that softens up, it should come together nicely. And we'll simply continue smooshing and smearing until, as we say in the business, we've creamed the sugar and the butter together. And you'll know when you've gone far enough, because it will lighten up in color and get nice and creamy and look something like this. And once that's set, we'll go ahead and stop and add the first of 2 eggs. And once that's been added, we'll continue with the spoon, sort of mixing that in. And yes, this is a little easier if you beat the egg first, but not so much that I actually want to do it. And speaking of easier, almost every recipe calls for using an electric mixer for this. But I have a theory that all Italian cookies come out better if you make them by hand. And like almost all my theories, I can't prove it, but I still believe it. So we'll go ahead and mix that first egg in with a spoon, at which point we're going to stop and switch to a whisk. And then we'll add the second egg, along with whatever flavorings we're going to use. And for me, that's going to be a little bit of vanilla extract, the pure and the real, as well as a spoon of almond extract. And then we'll go ahead and take our whisk and mix all that together until beautifully combined. And by the way, some people like to add lemon or orange zest at this point, but personally I don't. But if you want to, feel free. You are, after all, the John Gotti of your biscotti. And as the boss of this operation, you can add whatever you want. But anyway, regardless of what we add, we'll go ahead and mix that smooth with our whisk, at which point we'll stop and toss in our dry ingredients. And we'll switch back to the wooden spoon. And we will stir this together until just combined. Okay, just until the flour disappears. And by the way, if you're one of these people that lives in constant fear of overmixing doughs, you can totally relax here. There really is no way to screw this up. So we will simply mix this until we can't see any more flour, at which point we're going to stop and toss in our almonds, which I like to do in 2 forms. I'm going to add some whole roasted almonds, as well as an equal amount of roughly chopped almonds. And to me, I think that provides the best combination of texture and appearance. But you certainly could use all one or the other. And at this point, we'll give it one last mix with our spoon until we think those almonds are mixed in nice and evenly. Oh, and one more thing I should mention. I'm doing a fairly classic version here. But if you want to do this with other kinds of nuts, or maybe some dried fruit, this technique is pretty much going to work just the same. But anyway, we'll go ahead and mix in whatever we're using. And that is going to be it for this very simple dough, which if you had to, you could form into loaves, but it's really hard to work with because it's so sticky. So what I like to do is clean up the bowl, and then cover this in plastic, and then pop it in the fridge for about 30 minutes or so, or until it firms up. And that really is going to make it way, way easier to work with. So that's exactly what I did. And then once it's chilled, we'll go ahead and remove the plastic, and then divide the dough in half. And then to shape it, I'm going to go ahead and transfer it onto some plastic wrap. Okay, some people like to shape it on a floured board, but I think this is a little easier and less messy. Plus, maybe I don't want any more flour in my dough. So I'm going to go ahead and shape that in the plastic as shown until I have something that's about 3 or 4 inches wide and maybe 1.5 inches or so high. And by the way, just like the fillings, the exact shape is also something you can change up if you want. Or if you want to make this a little more narrow and a little taller, that's totally fine. Right, since we're going to slice and toast the cookies anyway, as long as it's not too flat, really any shape's going to work. And then once we are happy with how it's shaped, we will use the plastic to transfer that onto a lined baking sheet. Oh, and fair warning, this stuff will spread out as it bakes, so make sure you got 3 or 4 inches space in between. And then once these are panned up, if we want, we can flour our hands and do the final shaping, which I'm pretty sure is totally unnecessary. But as you longtime viewers know, I do like to touch the food as much as possible. So I did give those a little final shaping, whether they needed it or not. And then what we'll do once those are set is go ahead and transfer those into the center of a 350-degree oven for about 30 minutes or so, or until our loaves are lightly golden and look a little something like this. And if you want to check by poking them with a toothpick to see if it comes out clean, go ahead. But I could tell just by looking and feeling they might have gone long enough. And at this point, what we need to do before we try to cut these is let them cool for about 15 minutes so that these loaves firm up a little bit. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to get nice clean cuts through our nuts. And nobody wants a biscotti that doesn't have clean nut cuts. That is very important. So like I said, we'll go ahead and let those cool on the pan for about 15 minutes. At which point, using a serrated knife, we'll cut these at a slight angle into whatever size we want. Okay, somewhere between 1/2 and 1 inch is probably standard. But again, like so many things in this operation, that's going to be up to you. So I went ahead and sliced that up, as I mentioned, at a little bit of an angle, to give it that classic biscotti look. By the way, is it biscotti or biscotti? I'm sure someone will let me know in the comment section. And as promised, we got beautiful, beautiful clean cuts. And once cut, we'll go ahead and transfer those back onto our sheet pan for the final baking. And sure, if you want, you could toss those end pieces on, but I didn't, because I didn't want to crowd the pan, plus I wanted to eat them. And then what we'll do once our cookies are panned up and evenly spaced is reduce our oven to 325, and we'll pop those back in for about 12 minutes or so, at which point we're going to pull them out and flip them. And while you can use tongs, I do suggest using your fingers, since it's a great way to build up calluses. So we'll go ahead and turn over each one, at which point we'll put those back in our 325-degree oven for, I'm going to say, about 20 minutes or so. But that's a wild guess, because what you really want to do is bake those until they're exactly how you want. Okay, some people like these very light. Other people like them dark brown. But I like to go somewhere in the middle and bake mine until they're a gorgeous golden, which is what I have right here. Okay, so I don't like them too dark, but I do want them crunchy all the way through. So for me, these were just about perfect. And at this point, I have some horrible news. Right, we have to let these cool completely before we serve them. So at this point, we'll go ahead and transfer those to a rack to cool down. And those are the official instructions. Unofficially, of course, we're going to grab one and eat it warm. Mostly so I can let you hear that crunch. Oh yeah, that sounds right. And the taste was every bit as impressive. But anyway, we will let the rest cool down to room temp, at which point I will show you the second best way to eat these. And that's by dunking it in a hot cup of coffee. Of course, the best way is to dip it in sweet Italian dessert wine, with Vinsanto being the classic choice. But it was too early to drink. It was only 10 o'clock. And I have a strict rule, no drinking before 11. So I went with the coffee, which is still an amazing combination. And by the way, it's not the avocado toast that's preventing me from buying a house. It's this almond milk I steam for my coffee. This stuff's like $10 a quart. But anyway, that's it. How I do almond biscotti. Like I said, with the holidays coming up, not a bad idea to have a few plates of these around. Not to mention if you're looking for some kind of edible gift to give away, this really would be a great choice. So for those reasons and more, I really do hope you give these a try soon. So head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.